Hi, everyone. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. When my fiancée casually announced she was going on a trip with her ex-boyfriend, she laughed when I told her I wouldn't be there when she returned. What she thought was a joke about my jealousy turned out to be that I wasn't joking. By the time she came back from her weekend getaway, I had done something she never thought was possible. I had met Ashley through an online dating app 3 years earlier, drawn to her profile by her witty responses and the adventurous photos she had posted from various hiking trips and music festivals. She had a rebellious streak that made her seem exciting and unpredictable, someone who could challenge me to step outside my comfort zone and experience life more fully. Our first few dates confirmed that initial impression. Ashley was intelligent, funny, and had an independence that I found both attractive and slightly intimidating. We shared a love of many things that became the foundation of our early relationship. Ashley would suggest spontaneous activities to explore, and I found myself saying yes to experiences I might have avoided in previous relationships. She introduced me to rock climbing, convinced me to try skydiving, and encouraged me to take vacation time for travel that expanded my perspective on the world and my place in it. But even during those exciting early months, I noticed that Ashley maintained unusually close friendships with several men from her past, including ex-boyfriends and former dating partners. She would receive late-night text messages from these men, engage in long phone conversations that seemed more intimate than casual friendship, and frequently mention their names in stories about her daily life. When I asked about these relationships, Ashley would explain that she valued honesty and transparency in all her connections, and that cutting people out of her life just because they had been romantic partners seemed artificial and unnecessary. Most concerning was how Ashley would seek advice from these male friends about decisions that sometimes affected our relationship. When I tried to explain how these interactions made me feel less in our relationship, Ashley would respond that my discomfort was evidence of insecurity and jealousy rather than legitimate concerns about appropriate boundaries. She would point out that I had female friends too, conveniently ignoring the fact that I had never dated or been sexually involved with any of those women, which created an entirely different dynamic in terms of potential complications and conflicted loyalties. About 6 months into our relationship, Ashley brought up her most recent ex-boyfriend during a conversation about our past relationships. She explained that they had dated for nearly 2 years, but had ended things amicably when they realized they wanted different things for their futures. According to Ashley, this ex was now just a good friend who understood her better than most people, and their past romantic connection had evolved into a platonic relationship based on mutual respect and shared interests. I appreciated Ashley's honesty about her past, but I was uncomfortable with how frequently this ex appeared in her current life. Ashley seemed to view this guy as one of her closest confidants, someone whose opinion she valued on many topics that I thought should be primarily between us as a couple. Months later, when I brought up my concerns about Ashley's continued closeness with the ex, she immediately became defensive and accused me of trying to control her. She insisted that her friendship with other guys was completely innocent and that my discomfort with their relationship reflected my own jealousy and immaturity rather than any inappropriate behavior on her part. Ashley reminded me that she had chosen to be with me, not her ex, and that my attempts to limit her friendships were exactly the kind of possessive behavior that had ruined her previous relationships. These conversations about Ashley's male friendships became a recurring source of tension in our relationship, but I tried to suppress my concerns because I didn't want to be the kind of boyfriend who tried to dictate his partner's social life. I told myself that Ashley's openness about these friendships was actually a positive sign, evidence that she had nothing to hide and was committed to building our relationship on a foundation of openness and trust. As our relationship progressed into its second year, Ashley and I settled into patterns that felt comfortable and sustainable. We moved in together after 18 months, combining our belongings and establishing routines that reflected our shared commitment to building a future together. By our 3rd anniversary, I felt confident that Ashley and I had built something worth formalizing through engagement and marriage despite our disagreement. I had been planning a proposal for several months, thinking about how to create a memorable moment that would reflect the adventure and spontaneity that had characterized our relationship from the beginning. When I finally proposed during a weekend, Ashley's enthusiastic acceptance confirmed that we were both ready to take the next step toward permanent commitment. The engagement period began with excitement and optimism about our upcoming wedding and shared future. Ashley threw herself into wedding planning with the same energy she brought to all her projects, researching venues, comparing photographers, and creating detailed timelines for our celebration. We set a date 8 months in the future, giving ourselves enough time to plan the kind of wedding that would reflect our personalities and values, while managing the practical challenges of coordinating family schedules and budget constraints. The wedding planning process initially brought us closer together as we made decisions about everything from the guest list to the menu to the music for our reception. Ashley had strong opinions about most aspects of the celebration, and I was happy to let her take the lead on details that mattered more to her than to me. We toured venues together, tasted cakes, and spent evenings addressing invitations while discussing our hopes for married life. However, even during this period of focused collaboration, I discovered that Ashley was frequently in contact with her ex. Her closeness with her ex felt particularly inappropriate to me. When I suggested that she end these relationships, not because I wanted to control her friendships, but because the commitment we had made to each other seemed to require prioritizing our relationship over connections that might create confusion or conflict. Ashley would remind me that I had proposed to her, knowing about her friendship with these people, and that trying to change the terms of our relationship after the fact was unfair and manipulative. I had expected and assumed that becoming engaged would naturally create some distance between Ashley and her ex-boyfriend. Instead, Ashley seemed to view our engagement as confirmation that she could maintain all her existing relationships without any adjustments or boundaries. I used this opportunity to add that while I trusted her completely, I was uncomfortable with the amount of emotional energy she was investing in a relationship with her ex-boyfriend. I suggested that appropriate boundaries include limiting their contact to group settings and avoiding one-on-one meetings that could be misinterpreted by others or create opportunities for old feelings to resurface. Ashley insisted that her relationship with her male friends, including the ex, was completely platonic, and that my jealousy was creating problems that didn't exist. I tried to argue that my concerns weren't about trust or jealousy, but about respect and appropriate boundaries for people who were about to be married. I suggested that maintaining intimate friendships with ex-partners created complications that most couples chose to avoid, not because they were insecure, but because they prioritized their marriage over other relationships that might compete for emotional attention and loyalty. But Ashley interpreted my explanation as an attempt to control her. She accused me of being no different from other men who had tried to change her into someone more conventional and less independent. Ashley insisted that if I truly loved her, I would accept her friendships without trying to impose restrictions based on my own insecurities and outdated ideas about what engaged couples should or shouldn't do. This argument created a tension in our relationship that persisted for several weeks. We continued with our daily routines and wedding planning, but there was an underlying friction that made our interactions feel forced and careful. Ashley seemed to be testing my commitment by acting like she didn't care. The breaking point came on a Monday evening, about 4 months before our scheduled wedding date. I had just returned from work and was looking forward to a quiet evening at home when Ashley announced that she was planning to go on a trip the following weekend. When I asked who she would be traveling with, Ashley replied sarcastically that she was going with her ex, then laughed as if she had made a particularly clever joke. My immediate response was to tell Ashley that if she was serious about going on a trip with her ex-boyfriend, she shouldn't expect me to be there when she returned. I wasn't trying to make a threat or create drama. I was simply stating what seemed like an obvious consequence of her choice to prioritize her relationship with her ex over our engagement and upcoming marriage. Ashley's reaction was to laugh even harder, apparently finding my seriousness amusing rather than concerning. She seemed to view my response as evidence of exactly the kind of jealousy and possessiveness she had been criticizing, rather than recognizing it as a statement about boundaries and respect in our relationship. Later that evening, Ashley clarified that her comment about traveling with her ex had been sarcastic, and that she was actually planning a girls' weekend road trip with several female friends. She apologized for the confusion, but also suggested that my reaction had been disproportionate to what she claimed was obviously a joke. Ashley explained that the trip was completely harmless, just a chance to reconnect with friends she hadn't seen in several months. I felt relieved that I had misunderstood Ashley's initial comment, but I was also troubled by her choice to joke about going on a trip with her ex, given the recent tension in our relationship about appropriate boundaries with ex-partners. It seemed like Ashley was either testing my reactions or deliberately provoking me, neither of which felt like healthy communication patterns for a couple preparing for marriage. When Friday arrived, Ashley left for her weekend trip as planned, and I threw myself into projects around the apartment that I had been postponing. I planned to catch up on work, organize our closets, and maybe meet up with friends I hadn't seen recently. The weekend alone felt like an opportunity to reset our relationship and return to the positive energy we had been missing since our argument about her male friendships. I spent Friday evening cleaning the apartment thoroughly, something that usually felt like a chore, but which provided a meditative distraction from the tension that had been building between Ashley and me. I organized our shared closet, separating clothes that needed to be donated and reorganizing everything by season and frequency of use. The physical activity of cleaning and organizing helped me process some of the frustration I had been feeling about our communication problems. Saturday morning, I decided to tackle some home improvement projects that Ashley and I had been discussing but never seemed to find time to complete. These projects gave me a sense of accomplishment and reminded me why I enjoyed having time alone to focus on tasks that required concentration and attention to detail. But on that evening, as I was casually scrolling through Instagram, I discovered something that shattered any remaining trust one had in Ashley's honesty about her relationships and boundaries. A local restaurant had posted photos from their busy weekend, showcasing the various couples and groups who had dined there. In one of those photos, clearly visible at a corner table, were Ashley and her ex, sitting close together and looking very much like a couple enjoying a romantic dinner. The image hit me like a physical blow, not just because Ashley had lied about her weekend plans, but because seeing her with this guy confirmed that her sarcastic comment about traveling with him had actually been closer to the truth than her subsequent explanation about a girl's trip. Ashley had been planning to spend time with him all along, and had created an elaborate deception to cover up what she knew I would find unacceptable. I stared at the photo for several minutes, trying to process the full implications of what I was seeing. Ashley hadn't just maintained inappropriate boundaries with her ex-boyfriend. She had actively deceived me about her intentions, and had chosen to spend our weekend apart with someone she knew created conflict in our relationship. The casual intimacy visible in the photo suggested that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of an ongoing relationship that had been hidden from me. My first instinct was to call Ashley immediately and demand an explanation, but I realized that any conversation we had while she was still with her ex would be pointless. Instead, I spent Saturday night thinking about what this discovery meant for our relationship and our upcoming marriage. Ashley had shown me that she was willing to lie to my face, create elaborate deceptions, and prioritize her relationship with her ex over honesty and trust with me. On Sunday morning, I sent Ashley a text message that summarized my feelings about the situation and my decision about our future together. I told her that she had wanted freedom to maintain her relationships without interference from me, and that she now had that freedom because I would no longer be competing with ghosts from her past for her attention and loyalty. After sending the message, I immediately called a locksmith to change the locks on our apartment. I recognized that Ashley had made her choice about priorities, and I was making mine. Our engagement was over, and I wasn't interested in prolonging the inevitable with arguments, explanations, or attempts at reconciliation. The locksmith arrived within 2 hours of my call, a professional who seemed to understand that this was an emergency situation requiring immediate attention. While he worked on installing new locks, I began the process of systematically undoing the life Ashley and I had been building together. I spent Sunday calling my parents and closest friends to inform them that our wedding was canceled and that Ashley and I would no longer be together. Most of them were shocked by the sudden nature of my decision, but when I explained about the photo and Ashley's deception, they understood that the relationship had been compromised beyond repair. The conversation with my mother was particularly difficult because she had grown fond of Ashley and had been looking forward to the wedding as much as we were. When I explained what had happened, my mother was quiet for a long time before expressing her disappointment that Ashley had chosen to jeopardize our relationship for what seemed like such a trivial connection to her past. My father's reaction was more straightforward. He had always been somewhat skeptical of Ashley's need to maintain close relationships with male friends, and he told me that he respected my decision to end the engagement rather than trying to build a marriage on a foundation of dishonesty and competing loyalties. He offered to help me handle the financial aspects of canceling our wedding arrangements and dealing with deposits that might not be refundable. The process of canceling wedding vendors was emotionally exhausting. Most were understanding and professional, though several mentioned that they had dealt with similar situations before and that canceled weddings were more common than most people realized. Some vendors were able to refund our deposits completely, while others retained partial payments according to the terms of our contracts. The financial loss was significant but manageable, and I found myself grateful that we had chosen vendors with reasonable cancellation policies rather than locking ourselves into agreements that would have been more punitive under these circumstances. While Ashley was probably on her way back from her trip, I packed all of her belongings that Sunday evening carefully and arranged for them to be delivered to her parents' house, which was about an hour and a half away from our apartment. I wanted Ashley to understand that my decision was final and that I had no interest in negotiating or discussing the situation further. The time for conversation and compromise had ended when she chose deception over honesty. Ashley returned from her trip on Sunday evening to find herself locked out of the apartment we had shared for over a year. At first, she seemed to think I was bluffing or making a dramatic gesture that would lead to reconciliation once I had calmed down. She called and texted repeatedly, but I didn't respond to any of her attempts at communication. Ashley's messages revealed that she still didn't understand the seriousness of what she had done or the finality of my decision. She claimed that she knew I would react like this, and that's why she didn't tell me the truth. To console me, she claimed her time with her ex had been just friendly, that I was overreacting to something harmless, and that I was throwing away our entire relationship over nothing. She accused me of being too sensitive and suggested that we could work through this misunderstanding if I was willing to be reasonable and communicate with her. But I had already moved past the point where communication could resolve our problems. Ashley's lies for a weekend with her ex wasn't just about one incident of poor judgment. It was evidence of a fundamental incompatibility in our values about honesty, respect, and appropriate boundaries in committed relationships. She had shown me that she was willing to lie and deceive in order to maintain relationships that created conflict with our engagement, and that wasn't something that could be fixed through conversation or compromise. Over the following weeks, mutual friends began taking sides about our breakup, with some arguing that I had overreacted, while others supported my decision to end the engagement rather than trying to build a marriage on a foundation of deception and disrespect. I appreciated the support from friends who understood my position, but I wasn't interested in convincing anyone that my decision had been correct. The reactions from our social circle revealed interesting insights about how different people viewed relationships, commitment, and appropriate boundaries. Some friends, particularly those who had known Ashley longer, argued that her behavior was consistent with her personality and that I should have accepted her need for independence and diverse friendships. These friends suggested that my expectations about cutting ties with ex-partners were outdated and controlling, and that modern relationships required more flexibility and trust. Other friends, especially those who were married or in long-term committed relationships, understood why Ashley's deception had been a deal-breaker for me. They recognized that the issue wasn't about jealousy or insecurity, but about honesty and the willingness to prioritize our relationship over competing connections. These friends had faced similar challenges in their own relationships and had made different choices about how to handle ex-partners and opposite-sex friendships. I found myself having to explain repeatedly that my decision hadn't been based solely on Ashley's friendship with her ex, but on her willingness to lie and deceive in order to maintain that friendship. The weekend trip was simply the final confirmation of a pattern of dishonesty that had been developing throughout our engagement period. Ashley had shown me that she would choose deception over difficult conversations, and that revelation had made it impossible to trust her with the kind of vulnerability that marriage requires. Ashley continued to reach out through various channels, hoping that time would soften my position and that I would eventually be willing to discuss reconciliation. She sent messages, asked mutual friends to intercede on her behalf, and even showed up at my workplace to try to force a conversation about our relationship. But I had already made peace with my decision and wasn't interested in relitigating the circumstances that had led to our breakup. Her messages were particularly revealing because they showed that Ashley still didn't understand what she had done wrong or why her behavior had been unacceptable. She continued to frame the weekend as an innocent friendship activity that I had misinterpreted due to jealousy and insecurity. Ashley insisted that if I truly loved her, I would be able to forgive what she characterized as a minor mistake in judgment and work with her to rebuild our relationship. What Ashley's messages revealed was a fundamental misunderstanding of what trust means in a committed relationship. She seemed to believe that love should be unconditional and that my feelings for her should override any concerns about her behavior or choices. Ashley couldn't understand that love without respect and honesty was an insufficient foundation for marriage, and that my decision to end our engagement was actually evidence of how much I valued the kind of relationship that marriage was supposed to represent. The workplace confrontation was particularly uncomfortable because it forced me to involve my colleagues in personal drama that I had been trying to keep private. Ashley appeared at my office building one afternoon, apparently hoping that the public nature of the setting would prevent me from walking away from her attempts to discuss our relationship. Instead, her willingness to create a scene at my workplace simply confirmed that she was more concerned with getting what she wanted than with respecting my clearly stated boundaries about communication. During one of these encounters, I explained to Ashley that my decision hadn't been about jealousy or possessiveness, but about respect and trust. She had shown me that she was willing to deceive me to maintain a relationship that she knew created problems in our engagement, and that revelation had made it impossible for me to imagine a successful marriage between us. I told her that if she couldn't understand the difference between jealousy and legitimate concerns about honesty and boundaries, then we had been fundamentally incompatible from the beginning. Months later, when Ashley made one final attempt to restart our relationship, I responded with a variation of her own words from that Monday evening when this had all begun. I reminded her that she had told me not to be jealous about her trip with her ex, and assured her that she didn't need to worry about that anymore because I was no longer there to feel jealous about anything she chose to do. The experience taught me important lessons about the difference between trust and naivety, and about the importance of recognizing when someone's actions consistently contradict their words. Ashley had repeatedly claimed that her relationships with male friends, particularly her ex, were innocent and appropriate, but her behavior had shown a pattern of deception and boundary violations that made those claims meaningless. I learned that healthy relationships require partners who are willing to prioritize their commitment to each other over connections that create conflict or confusion. Most importantly, I discovered that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from someone who repeatedly shows you that they don't share your values about honesty, respect, and commitment. The end of our engagement was painful, but it was also liberating. I no longer had to wonder about Ashley's true priorities or make excuses for behavior that made me uncomfortable. I could focus on building a life that reflected my values and finding a partner who shared my beliefs about what commitment and respect look like in practice rather than just in theory. Looking back, Ashley's sarcastic comment about going on a trip with her ex had actually been one of the most honest things she had said to me in months. It revealed what she was really planning to do and showed me exactly where I ranked in her priorities. Sometimes the truth comes out in jokes, and sometimes the most important conversations happen when people think they're not being serious. The photo I found on Instagram wasn't just evidence of Ashley's deception. It was a gift that showed me the reality of our relationship before I made the mistake of marrying someone who didn't respect the boundaries that healthy partnerships require. Ashley had tested my limits one too many times and finally discovered that I actually had them. The weekend that Ashley thought would give her freedom to explore her connection with her ex ultimately gave me the freedom to find someone who understood that marriage requires choosing one person over all others, not just in legal terms, but in daily actions and priorities. Her trip with her ex-boyfriend became the beginning of my journey toward a relationship built on genuine trust and shared values rather than constant negotiation about appropriate boundaries.